readers. Welcome to my channel, Books, Ink, and Paper, and welcome to the soul-sucking summer that we are experiencing anyway, and many people seem to be experiencing across the United States, at least. I don't know how it feels in other parts of the world, but I hope wherever you are, you have an air conditioner that works well for you and a cool breeze at night and some kind of peace with this current situation. What worries me about it being so hot this soon, and we're at heat advisory stage here where I live, which is very unusual for the end of May, that usually creates a little bit of concern about how this hurricane season will be. Because if you weren't aware, when the Gulf becomes very, very warm, it is the perfect condition for hurricanes to form. So we want the Gulf to be cooler than it's going to be if this continues. So think good thoughts for all of us who live along these areas in which we could be victims of some pretty volatile weather. Meanwhile, for those of you who are subscribers or viewers and are living in the areas in which there have been multitudes of tornadoes recently, I just want to tell you that I'm thinking of all of you all of the time. I'm sending out my own little prayers and spiritual practices for you. And I am really just devastated every time I see the impact of these storms on another community. It is just terrifying sometimes what we're experiencing in terms of volatility with the weather. So all of you be safe, all of you be well, and all of you know that all you have to do is reach out and ask for the help of a neighbor or a friend or a community of people. And I know this because that is what has happened to us in a number of storms that we've endured here on the coast. So one day maybe I'll tell you my Katrina recovery story. It's quite something. But today we're going to talk about books that I've read that are set in the summer. In case you're still wondering about books that you'd like to read, I thought I would compile a list of those that I have read and just talk about them with you. I just got to thinking about what books do I remember reading in the summer or reading knowing that they were set in the summer. Maybe I read them in the winter because I was cold. I don't know, but let's get started. The first one is called Instructions for a Heat Wave, and this is by Maggie O'Farrell. Now, those of you who've been viewers of my channel for a while know that I really do enjoy Maggie O'Farrell a lot. I have Hamnet on my Kindle, but I haven't started it yet. But this one was one of my earlier Maggie O'Farrell reads, and I do remember it being set in the heat of the summer, and I remember these characters very, very well. So this one is set in 1976, and the main character in this book is Greta Riordan, and she has discovered that her husband has taken all of their money out of her bank account or their bank account and has disappeared. And so she calls her children home, and her children are Michael, who is a history teacher, and Monica, who has had a difficult life, as I remember, but I'm not quite sure I remember what exactly happened to her, but I think it was maybe her relationship issues. And then there's Aoife, and Aoife is the youngest, and she comes from Manhattan to be with her mother, and she has some secrets that she doesn't want them to know about her. I just remember feeling very, very drawn to this book and these characters, and indeed Aoife for sure. She was my favorite. She was sort of like the renegade. Isn't the youngest often the renegade? But I just loved the way this unfolded and the character development of this, and just kind of trying to understand who they are together and who they are as a family was the theme that I recall, and I really do recommend that one. The next one is a book that I read years ago to determine if it was a book that I wanted to pass to my daughters at that time. And I remember really enjoying this book, and it just reminds me of summer, and I've never really forgotten this book. So this is The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, and this is by Anne Breshears. And this is book one in a series that I did not continue with, but I think perhaps my youngest did continue with it. So I'm going to read you the synopsis because it sets it up, but it's also really cute. Four very different friends, one pair of magical pants and a summer apart. We, the Sisterhood, hereby instate the following rules to govern the use of the traveling pants. 1, you must never wash the pants. 2, you must never double cuff the pants. It's tacky. There will never be a time when this will not be tacky. 3, you must never say the word fat, P-H-A-T, while wearing the pants. You also must never think I am fat while wearing the pants. 4, you must never let a boy take off the pants, although you may take them off yourself in his presence. 5, you must not pick your nose while wearing the pants. You may, however, scratch casually at your nostril while kind of really picking. 6, upon our reunion, you must follow the proper procedures for documenting your time in the pants. 7, you must write to your sisters throughout the summer, no matter how much fun you are having without them. 8, you must pass the pants along to your sister according to the specifications set down by the Sisterhood. Failure to comply will result in a severe spanking upon our reunion. And 9, you must not wear the pants with a tucked-in shirt and belt. See rule number 10. And number 2, and rule number 10 is pants equals love. Love your pals, love yourself. So these sisters all end up in different places for the summer. They're not happy about it. They're not sisters in real life, obviously, but they then transfer the pants to each other at different parts of the summer, and then they talk about what happened while they had the pants. I just loved the way that this was crafted. And I loved the kind of the smartness of it. And I think it's a beloved book for a lot of people. It says it's recommended for ages 11 to 13. I guess that's probably true. You know, I'm not as current on these kinds of things, but I also think it's very interesting for adults as well. So if you're looking for something light and fun, I would suspect that that would do it for you. Another one, which is interesting because when I was making this list, I didn't anticipate that I had read this many books for younger people in the summer as I had. So this one is We Were Liars, and this is by E. Lockhart. And I read this years ago, and I gave it 5 stars. I looked today, so I read it after I had gotten on Goodreads. And I remember, again, really being immersed in this, although summer reads are easy for me to get immersed in, I will say. I don't know why, they just really are. Maybe because less is happening during the summer than typically in the first of the year or the end of the year. I don't know. But this one follows a lot of friends who end up in this on this private island. I think they each have, as I remember, and again, it's been a while, they each have a house or a cabin, all connected as friends. Uh, one of them is a brilliant kind of broken girl. I remember her having a lot of challenges. There's another boy who's very political and very intellectual, and some of them are very much less so. And they're connecting with each other and they're swimming and doing all these summery things, as I remember. And then something destructive begins to occur within this group of people, and something happens, and then they are all having to lie about that. And there is a prequel to this that's called Family of Liars, but I haven't read that or looked at that at all. But this came out in paperback anyway in 2018. So it has been a while since I read this book. Let me see when I actually did read it. I read this book 6 years ago. This is a YA, and it is a bit dark, as I remember, but it was delicious. I really remember it being something that I couldn't put down. Okay, here's another one, although this one I read long ago and haven't reread it. That is sort of a noticing on my part that this summer might be time for me to take a look at again. And this is a classic called A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. And if you haven't read this book, or your kids haven't read this book and they're open to reading books that are set in the early 20th century, then this might be for them. So this one is set in New York, and it follows the story of a girl, a young girl whose name is Francie. And Francie lives in it said Williamsburg, New York, which I don't remember that. I just remember it being set in New York. And I will tell you that this book is responsible for my love of New York, actually. I do remember just getting hooked into the setting and place of this particular book, as well as the family. So Frances is really getting to know and kind of getting her footing with her family, especially her immigrant grandparents. And she's trying to understand sort of the changes that are occurring within her, as well as the the family that is trying to protect her. They're very tight-knit, they're very careful, they're very I don't know. They're very based in their roots and in their story. And so Francie is trying to navigate her own journey, her own resilience, her own ability to figure out who she is and how she's connected to these roots as well as what she kind of wants for her life. Here's my problem with this too. It's currently on Kindle for 99 cents. And I'm on a no buy. I know, like how did this happen? But I do think I love this cover, and if this cover is available in paperback or something, I would probably get it. This one remains a classic and one of my favorites, and it's often recommended by teachers for students to read still, which makes me think that it is still relevant. Okay, let's get into more adult summer reading. And in this particular vein, I have picked a kind of a gruesome one, but it's one of my favorites, and it's a series that I really am committed to over time. This is Patricia Cornwell's first novel, which is Postmortem. And I was thinking that this was set in the summer, and then when I grabbed it to see if that was true, the first line of this book is, "It was raining in Richmond on Friday, June 6th." So yes, I do remember the heat being a factor in this book, as well as the setting in Richmond is one of my favorites. I do love Virginia very, very much. If you're into serial killer novels, this series is definitely for you. It is endless. There are so many in this series, but the first one is pretty short. They get a lot longer as she goes along. And I've read this more than once, and it stands up for me as a good setup for the characters in this story. Kay Scarpetta is the medical examiner for this particular area in Richmond, and she works with the police to really get them a good idea of what's happening with these murders. This serial killer is striking more than one young woman, and the fingerprint that he leaves is unique, and I won't tell you about it, but also very difficult to track. And so Kay works through this entire novel to try to figure out who this serial killer is, and she's really struggling because there's some people that want her off the case as well, and she's also trying to care for her young niece who is not getting the love and attention that she needs from her mom. And you will notice that if you go on with the series that her niece continues to be featured in these books. And so I've always really liked that too. Kay Scarpetta is not married. They are pretty gruesome for people who have a low tolerance to that sort of thing, but they're well crafted, and I really do enjoy these, and I recommend starting obviously from the top, but also if you're looking for a summer serial killer read, this one might be the ticket. Now I have two by the same author, one of which is the first one I read of hers, and I think it came out first. This one is set in the summer, and the second is not set in the summer, but it ends, so to speak, a little bit into the summer. So let's talk first about The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. If you haven't read this, it is probably one of the books I recommend to people the most, especially to people who perhaps are looking for a story about women and about the strength of family and found family, really. So this one is about Lily. It's set in 1964, and Lily's mother was killed in front of her, although she has a very vague memory of what actually happened. And she's now being cared for by her stand-in mother, Rosaline, who insults three racist men one day on their way. I think they were on their way to town. Perhaps she was on her way to register to vote, now that I think about it. And she then is arrested, and Lily tries to free her, and then they flee to another community called Tiburon, South Carolina, which actually is where she can find out some information about her mother, turns out, meet some other people. She also discovers the Black Madonna, which I remember so fully and vividly, as well as bees and honey. And so this one is about women who share their own stories, their own power, and their own commitment and love and caring to other women, and in particular to this child. It was adapted into a movie, and I loved the movie as well, but I think I loved the book more. Then The Mermaid Chair was, it begins in the winter, but it sort of follows this woman's diary about her experience from winter to the end of May. So I still think it would be a good read, and it's also really just one that I've not forgotten. This woman's name is Jessie Sullivan, and she is struggling with her marriage and her relationships and just her feeling of connection to her full self, and maybe a bit of a midlife crisis is occurring for her. And so she goes to a monastery and she meets a monk and she falls in love with the monk. Yeah, I know. I remember just being completely engrossed in this, and I've always had an affinity for the Catholic Church, even though I have never converted to Catholicism. I have considered it for a while. I really like ritual of any kind in a church setting, so that one always kind of stood out to me. But I loved this book for a variety of reasons, no less so the development of these characters and this particular story. So if you want kind of a back-to-back experience of Sue Monk Kidd, I would recommend the two of these. Now for something completely different, I bring forward to you Bag of Bones by Stephen King. Now, I have not read all of Stephen King's titles, but this one is one of my absolute favorites, and not necessarily because of the horror that I remember of it, but because of the character development and the plot of this one. So I think they also adapted this into a film or a mini series, and I think I remember seeing it, but that I have little memory of. However, this book I have a good memory of. This one is about a man named Mike Noonan, and he is an author, and his wife has died, and he's grieving, and he's really in a writing slump as a result. Obviously, he's having trouble creating. So he flees to a cabin, and this cabin is named Sarah Laughs. And he decides he's on a lake, there in this cabin, and he decides he's just going to kind of take some time to see if he can rekindle his ability to write something. Meanwhile, a millionaire in this community named Max, is trying to take his granddaughter away from her mom, who is his daughter. I think his daughter is a widow, and I guess he thinks that she's incapable, as I remember, of taking care of this child. And so Mike gets kind of involved in this and starts to really, care about both of these people and wants to help the mother keep her child and fight this millionaire for this, for this purpose. But then also he discovers that Sarah Laughs, the place that he has named and is living in, has some mysterious haunted qualities about it. So this one I would say is a ghosty kind of a story, but also it just has a little bit more teeth to it, I guess, in the sense of the development of the characters. Not that many of his aren't well developed, but this one I just remember really caring about Mike Noonan and really caring about his grief, and I remember really caring about this child and her mom. So if you're up to it, Stephen King Bag of Bones is one that I think is great, and it is set on a lakeside in the summer. What could be better? This is another one I read in 2018, and I feel like it was recommended to me by Lindsay at Lindsay's Little Library, but I could be wrong. But Lindsay, if you're watching this, let me know if that was you. But this is Neighborly by Ellie, sorry, Neighborly by Ellie Minago. And this is definitely a summer read, and it is one of my favorite tropes, which is a neighborhood community in which something goes wrong. So this is about Kat and Doug, and they want to live in a subdivision called Aurora Village, and this is a kind of a pricey place. So they are struggling with whether or not they can afford this bungalow, and they put everything they own and all of their money into this space so that they can live in this kind of charismatic neighborhood. For whatever reason, this is really drawing them forward. And so Kat has a newborn baby, obviously his child, and she's adjusting not only to motherhood, but also into this space. And she doesn't come from money. So this is kind of uncomfortable for her, and she's having a little bit of trouble fitting in with the neighbors and feeling like she wants to really socialize. And then one day, a note shows up on the mat in front of their door that says, "That wasn't very neighborly of you." And she has no idea where this came from. She's very disturbed by it, and continuous notes start to arrive. It wasn't a 5-star read for me. In fact, I gave it a 3-star, but I remember being immersed in it, and I remember it being a great summer read. And 3 stars is a great read. I actually purchased it on Kindle, so I still could reread it. And those of you who might be interested in this, it is currently on Kindle Unlimited, if that's a subscription service that you have. But I loved the cover of this. I just remember it being suspenseful, and the characters were pretty well developed, and there were some secrets. There were some things that some of the neighbors were doing that wasn't very neighborly. And the last one I'm putting forward for you today is The Gates of Evangeline by Hester Young. This one I read about 7 years ago, and I can't remember how I discovered this one, but I do remember vividly that I tweeted about this book, and Hester Young tweeted back to me and said she appreciated that I liked her book, and she was just really, really kind. And so I felt like I had, hung the moon in that moment because an author actually reached out to me. But this was her debut novel, and it is a mystery. It is set in Louisiana. And you can tell by the cover that this one is set in the summer. And I do remember the heat being a factor in this. But Charlotte Kate, who's actually named Charlie starts to have these sort of visions about a little boy in a boat. And she's not sure where this is coming from and thinks perhaps she's actually losing her mind. But then she realizes that these visions are telling her things that are important. Turns out this is an old missing child mystery that's never been resolved, and she heads south to be able to work with some people to try to discover if these visions are connected and real enough that she can figure out what happened to this little boy. She meets another person in this process whose name is Noah. She and Noah kind of work together to see if they can figure this out. And it is a kind of a gothic Southern mystery, although it's set in modern day. I gave this book 4 stars. And again, I remember liking it enough to have tweeted about it at that time. And then I did go on to read The Shimmering Road, which was book 2 by Hester Young. And I gave that one 4 stars as well. I finished that in April of 2017, and that was actually set right after the first book was set. So I don't want to tell you anything about the second one because there is a bit of a spoiler in the synopsis on Goodreads. So if you don't want to know what happens as a result of the first one, you might not want to read the synopsis. But I did enjoy book 2. And then she also has The Burning Island, which came out in 2019, and I did not get to that one, but I certainly could. And I wonder if this one is set in the summer as well. She's in Hawaii. So even if it's not technically set in the summer, it probably has a summer vibe to it. So I could get to the Burning Island during my summer reading challenge, and then I would have finished all 3 of the books in this series. This book also has another kind of connection to me, probably one of the reasons I bought it, because the house that we owned before we moved here, the historic home that we had near the water, was an old house. We named that house Evangeline when we moved into it. So there's some titles that you could look at for the summer. If you're interested in any of these, let me know which one you think you might pick up first. Just let me know if you've read any of them, because I would love to hear what you think of them. Lose yourself in a great book and enjoy, and happy reading. Bye.